I'm sitting here with a fantastic person. And in these special times with Corona, where some people have more time and other people need hope, inspiration. I'm sitting here with a wonderful guy. I've not met him in person, but I found him on the internet and I was struck by his skills on particularly storytelling. And and I find him a fascinating, empathetic person. Although I've not met him, and as you maybe know, a lot of times some charisma is lost through the camera, and this guy just has a ton of charisma, ton of likability, and he's an awesome storyteller. So I'm very happy to welcome you, Amin Haque, longtime storyteller. Um, in this talk, we can talk a little bit about stories, how to tell them, and what other kinds of tools and techniques you have. I know you have shared a lot on the internet. So first of all, welcome, Amin.
Thank you, Asghar, and looking forward to our conversation today.
Perfect. So I've watched a couple of your talks on the internet, and it's so fascinating. You can really see that you have this burning desire for stories, for communication. And as you talk about, you've always had it. Do you know where it comes from? Is it something you're born with, or where does this passion come from? Because it's burning like a strong fire.
Well, thank you. That's such a wonderful question. I believe we are all storytellers the moment we are born as human beings. What differentiates human beings from everybody else is the fact that we have this ability to imagine alternate worlds and imagine that there can be a better tomorrow when the reality doesn't exist like that. We can imagine that paper currency like money and one sheet of paper can have a value of 5,000. Another sheet of paper can have a value of 2,000, as as Yuval Noah Harari says in his book *Sapiens*. We have that ability to imagine, and that makes all of us as human beings a storyteller. So I don't have a rare gift here. I am gifted with the same thing that everyone is gifted with. All of us are born storytellers. But when I was a kid, I used to stammer a little bit, and as a result, I was a bit shy. I was reserved. I was not very outgoing, and my mother, who was a college teacher, she was anxious that I should do better, and out of deep concern and anxiety for me, she enrolled me into speech therapy and elocutions and debate competitions and enlisted me in drama and theater when I was in school. All of these things helped me. Of course, when I was a kid, I hated all of them. But when I look
Really?
back now, when I look back now, I'm very grateful to her because all of these things helped me. I fell in love with theater. My first role in a school production was to play a dead body. So I had no speaking part. Uh, but soon I got around to doing better. I wrote my first play when I was in class 10th and in grade 10th, and I directed that as well. And I fell in love with the stage. It gave me a lot of confidence. And I lost my stammer by the time I was in my late teens. Speech therapy helped, thinking through helped, and theater helped. And theater became a large part of my life. Coincidentally, as part of my work, I worked in advertising. And in advertising, we tell brand stories, stories of brands and organizations to people. And in the evenings, I used to work in theater. So I had a day job and an evening job. And both my jobs had something to do with stories, advertising during the day and theater by the evenings. And working with them for a long time, I realized that stories are very powerful, but we don't leverage the power of storytelling as much as we can. In education, we don't leverage that power as much as we can in leadership work. And I wanted to explore that. I wanted to go deeper and help people become better storytellers. And that's how Storywalas was born.
Wow, yeah, and I've just seen recently you're doing some amazing work trying to help those that are affected with this coronavirus. But yeah, it's an interesting story you have, and I think maybe, I mean, at least for me, it's a key takeaway. You say we can all learn the skill that you don't consider yourself having a special skill. And as you maybe know, I also train and teach people in public speaking. And a lot of them, they say, oh, he was born a great speaker, or he just seems so natural. But a lot of times we don't know the story behind it. And for instance, I mean, you learned it as a child, many of these tools. So maybe if you were in school, you were 18 and say, oh, I mean, it's just so amazing. But maybe you had hundreds, even thousands of hours of practice behind it. So first key takeaway here, really, like you say, we can all learn this skill, and it's underestimated that the power of the story. Why do you think we don't use stories more in today's world?
Yeah, so if you look at evolution,
Sure.
we have come from the story age to the industrial age,
Yeah.
and now we are in the age of information and AI and analytics,
Yes.
and 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 the next stage is going back to be the story age. And I'll tell you why this comes back in circles, or why it's cyclical, why
Yeah.
it works like a cycle. If you look at music today and how we consume music, uh, if you go back to the early days, we consumed music in the most raw form. We didn't have music schools where people would go and earn degrees in music or learn instruments, but we had folk music, people's music. And then schools got formed, and then people, we codified music. People learned it, got degrees, and started playing, practicing. There was a method around it, but soon music got commercialized, and we got to the next stage where people started producing movies, and there was music for movies, there was music in bands, there were radio stations, and there were rock bands and pop music. And then we had instrumentation and computers, and programming coming into music, so that sounds could be recorded using machines and computers. And post that, where are we today? We crave for unplugged music. We crave for the raw and real experience where somebody plugs off all the instruments, but for the authentic experience where it's just the singer and his guitar and his voice. And it may not be as polished or finished, but it is authentic. Similarly, we've gone through the age of data and come back. Uh, I have always believed that when a trend becomes very strong, there emerges a counter trend. The
Yes.
music example was exactly like this. When there was too much programming and computers in music to create music, we started craving for the counter trend, which is raw, authentic, unplugged music. Similarly, when there's too much data and information and death by PowerPoint, we start
Mm.
craving and we say, can you please keep aside the PowerPoint and please tell us a story instead?
Yes, that's so true, and that's a very nice way of putting it. Uh, One thing I have experienced with stories is sometimes, especially in the academic world, a lot of people are afraid to tell the story because they think, oh, this is for children, or there's something not right about it. And a while ago, I was coaching a person, and she was going to give a speech, and I told her, start with the story. It was a very powerful story. And we did. So we had written the whole script and the story. And then she changed it herself and started giving all the information, all the models behind the story. I was like, no, 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 no. But I couldn't convince her to start with the story. I went to hear the speech, and she just gave a little glimpse of that story in the very beginning. And I looked around at the audience, and I could see, the rhythm, the pace, just, oh, so amazing. That's the story. And then the disappointment in their eyes right after the data, the information. And she kind of lost them a little bit. And then later the story came. But if she had started with the story, well, what's your take on it? Do you feel that some people are afraid to tell stories because it's childish or non-academic?
A lot of people have that fear, and you're bang on. You're absolutely right that people think stories are for kids. uh, People think that stories are not academic enough or not business enough,
Mm.
not for leaders to tell. But I say this to them: look around you, and you will see that the best leaders across time, across generations, have been storytellers.
Okay.
Gandhi was a great storyteller.
Yes.
Mandela was a great storyteller. Barack Obama was a great storyteller. Abraham, George Abraham was a great. Abraham Lincoln was a great storyteller. So when you think of when you think of political leaders,
Mm.
you will see that great political leaders are great storytellers. Now let's look at spiritual leaders. You will find spiritual leaders across the world, no matter which faith they profess. All of them happen to be great storytellers. Now let's look at business leaders, and you'll find Steve Jobs, one of the
Mm.
best storytellers that we had in recent times. Richard Branson,
Yes.
uh, Jack Ma of Alibaba.com, Elon Musk, or uh, Sheryl Sandberg at Facebook to some extent. Much better storyteller than Mark Zuckerberg for sure.
Mm.
And um, if I could look at one more name, Indra Nooyi, who was still recently with Pepsi, one of the finest storytellers that I've seen.
Yeah.
So whether it's a business leader or a spiritual leader or a political leader, you can see the correlation. Leaders make, some of the finest leaders are great storytellers. Now look at that and think about the correlation. Leaders,
Yeah.
storytelling. Because one of the jobs leaders have, or one of the things, big things they do, is they share vision and they inspire people to work towards that vision. And the best way to do that is by telling a story. So, and that's why we are seeing a resurgence, whether it is TED Talks, where
Mm.
some of the finest scientists,
Mm.
researchers, people who are changing the world, social sector, people who work in development sector, those who are at the forefront of change makers, the way they can scale the change is by telling the story of the change and ensuring more people join that. So, unfortunately, some people still think that stories are kiddish, they are for kids. Uh,
Yeah.
but we are seeing strong winds of change.
I think you're right, and I'm very happy you shared this because I felt I lacked with that person. I couldn't convince or tell the story, but now that you put it forward, see all these people, and like you say, spiritual leaders. It could be Christian people. Jesus, for instance, yeah, he went out and told stories. The same with other religions; they didn't bombard them with data. And probably it's just so easy today to give information. I mean, it's just a few clicks on Google and we have the information, but really crafting the story and put it in a good framework is what we need to do. And like you say, then we want the information. We have to make ourselves earned to give that 1, 2, 3 takeaways. So I'm very happy you shared this, and the people that cannot see the power of a story, hopefully you can now, because there's, like you say, a strong correlation between that. Um, and the thing for me is also, we can look at obviously, like you say, the stories, and many people that are great leaders, they've told stories, but what is it that happens in our bodies, minds, when we hear the story? What is your experience when you go out and tell stories? What do people tell you that happened to them?
So, two or three things. When you work with stories, you speak to people's emotions.
Yeah.
That's what stories do. And people in business may think, oh, but business decisions are not made based on emotions. Uh, they are, well, I have news for them. There is a field of science called decision science.
Mm.
And decision scientists are behavioral economists. They study on what basis do people decide when they vote for a political party. How do they decide whether to vote for this political party or that political party? Behavioral economists are the people who concern themselves with decisions like when somebody chooses between Colgate and Pepsodent. How do they make the choice which toothpaste to buy? How do people make the choice whether I should buy a BMW or Mercedes Benz? And how should I choose whether I should send my kid for further education to Wharton or to Stanford? How do people make decisions?
Mm.
And decision scientists, it's a new science, and they've been studying uh, uh, people's response to choices.
Mm.
And some of the best decision scientists, they have been writing books and laying out the science for us. There is Sheena Iyengar with her path breaking book called The Art of Choosing, which is a fantastic book on decision choice. The winner of the Nobel Prize on Behavioral Economics last
Mm.
year was Richard Thaler for a book called Nudge. Now, nudge, it's a very interesting word. You know
Yeah.
what nudge means, that somebody is sitting on the fence. They are not decided. And how can we nudge that person to take a decision?
Nudge. Yeah.
So, so nudge talks about what nudges work and what nudges don't work. And that's what Richard's life's work is. And he's captured that in that book and he won the Nobel Prize for that. And what's he saying in that? He is saying that people decide from the emotional side of the brain and
Mm.
stories speak to people's emotions. So now you got evidence from
Mm.
Nobel Prize winners and decision scientists and behavioral economists that tells you why leaders should be storytellers, because leadership is about influencing decisions. Business is about influencing decisions. How do we decide which course of action to take? And when you want to, therefore, it's important. Data is important, information is important, but it's also important that we weave that information into a narrative. We stitch them together through a structural thread where people consume that information in the form of a story, because data gets forgotten, but stories get remembered.
That's true. And I think you really nailed it, because I mean, we went back in time, looked at all the leaders, and now the new evidence that is evolving on decision and the very interesting things we can see also when we study what people choose and what happens in the brain. And I'm sure there are lots of studies. Actually, I've read a lot of studies on, you can see that a lot of parts of the brains lit up when we hear stories. So the evidence is there. So tell the stories and you will make a big difference. So now that we know we need to tell stories and that they are very important and they can make a big change in people and inspire, what do we do? What do we do? How do we tell a good story? What are some of the key elements, maybe a structure to a great story? What would you say?
Sure. Of course, there is a structure and there are some elements to story, and there is characters and there's conflict and there is resolution. But there are some other things which are more important
Okay.
than a structure, because a structure is to be played with, and a good storyteller will take a structure and not follow it literally. They will use that structure. They'll build on it. A structure is like a skeleton. Uh, there can be a skeleton is a basic structure, but the flesh and blood is what makes the skeleton come to life, and every storyteller will add flesh and blood in their own way. So there are a couple of things that are more important than even a structure. So the first thing that's most important in a story is authenticity.
Okay.
And stories are not exaggeration, stories are not manipulation, but I think stories are truth well told. And there are two elements to that: truth and well told.
Okay.
All great stories are true at some level. When we look at brand stories, they are anchored in consumer truths. When we look at political narratives, they are anchored in the truth of the voters and what their fears and their anxieties and their concerns. When we look at religious stories, one can argue that they are fictional perhaps, but they are anchored in universal truths, and I call them universal truths. So no matter whether it's a product story needs to be anchored in some product truth. So, so good stories need to be anchored in truth, but a leader's truth is actions. And I believe actions speak louder than words. So if there's something more important than the story you tell, it is the story you embody, imbibe, and live. I'll give an example.
Okay.
I can send a, I may want to tell a story as a CEO of a company to all my employees that we are going through tough times. We have to tighten the belt. We are going through cost cutting measures. Please switch off the lights when you leave the meeting room, and so on and so forth. But it's all communication and talk. What are the leader's actions and what is the leader doing? Now, there's a leader of a company called Infosys. When Narayan Murthy was the CEO, and he was one of the richest guys in India, one of the richest guys in India. but he started flying economy class. And when he started flying economy, not just domestic, but also international, he was leading by example. And that's what I mean, that your actions speak louder than words. Now imagine if he was telling everyone to cut costs and he himself was flying a luxury, there would be a disconnect between the story you are telling and the story you are living. And therefore I say that when what you say is aligned to what you do and what you do is aligned to what you believe in, then your story is authentic. So first, the story needs to be authentic.
Yeah.
Two, we must remember that if you're a company, if you're a leader, if you're an organization, you are not the only one who's telling that story. Your employees are telling the story of your organization on Glassdoor, and your customers are telling the story on Amazon.com or on TripAdvisor.com. Whether it's Uber or Airbnb, all of them depend on reviews and customer reviews. So I say that the best story, your best story, is not the one you tell, but perhaps sometimes your best story can also be told by your customers, a happy customer. So that's the second thing to keep in mind, that if I don't have to tell my story, if somebody else tells my story on my behalf, there's nothing better than that. My story has done its job. So authenticity and word of mouth. And the third thing that comes before a structure, and what differentiates oratory from storytelling, is that a good storyteller must be a wonderful listener. It's only when you listen and observe. When I say listen, I just don't mean by the ear, but I mean observation skills. The ability to, leaders have great observation skills and they can sense the mood of the nation. They have a finger on the pulse of the people. And that's where listening comes in. And listening is more important than, sometimes even more important than telling, because it's only when you listen and observe, then you can tell a great story, because then your story will connect with the audience. So these are the three fundamental ideas or pillars. On top of that comes structure. And then one can have a good structure with, you need a character, of course, in a story, and then you need conflict, and then you need resolution. But of these three, the most important thing is conflict.
Okay.
And here's the reason why. If there's no conflict, there's no story.
Yeah.
Boy loves girl and girl loves boy, and they lived happily ever after. There is no story in the world like that. But boy loves girl, girl loves boy, but there is conflict. Now we can all see that story.
Yeah, that's true. And that's a story that's been told many times with different, like you say, different flesh and different blood. And we want to hear it's about love and yeah, a lot. So that's very interesting. You talk about being authentic, telling the truth. And I think that's so right. Especially sometimes political people gets blamed for not being truthful. They tell us to cut costs and they go out and spend a lot. So I mean, this one should be easy for people. You tell your truth, what you do, and maybe that's also why. I mean, we can all read a book or two, three about how to become a millionaire and make lots of money, and go out talk about it. But I mean, if I haven't done it, people won't listen. Maybe the information is right, but it's not authentic. So we won't listen. And that's why we want to hear about the guy that climbed the mountain in Nepal or in the Himalayas, the people that did it. So we got to go out there and do it and tell us. And you say, well told. So what would be some tips for telling the story well? What do you do? I mean, it's a huge topic, I know.
It's a sharp question. I'm glad you picked up on both the parts. We've talked about truth, and now it's time to talk about well told.
Yeah.
To me, well told is about re-articulation. It's about reframing. It's about saying it well. And there is the data, or there is the truth, or there is the information, and then weaving it into narrative is all about the well told. Well told is about having a great vocabulary. Well told is about using metaphors and analogies. Well told is about thinking through numbers and data and saying, what frame of reference should I use so that this data comes alive. Let me give you an example here.
Okay.
Let's talk about a serious topic, sexual harassment of women. And say, I suppose I am making a presentation or I'm speaking at a podium and I really want people to feel about this. I'm not shying away from this topic. People usually shy away from this topic. They don't like to talk about it. They sweep it under the carpet. But I want people to think about it, because if we don't talk about it, if we don't acknowledge it, how will we act upon it? So I want to bring to people's notice this topic, and I'm doing that using data. So if I was to say that 30% of women in India face sexual harassment. Now, that's one way of articulating. Why don't I do this? Asghar, let me play with you and let me ask you a question. I'm going to give you 3 choices, articulation choices. And as somebody who teaches and coaches people, you tell me what sounds better to you. And you don't have to respond as a coach now, but just respond as a human being and say what connects better with you.
Okay.
But all the 3 choices I give you are the same thing. They are not different from each other. I would just be stating them differently. So option 1, 30% of women in India face sexual harassment. Option 2, 3 out of 10 women in India face sexual harassment. Option 3, 1 out of every 3 women in India faces sexual harassment. Which one connects better with you?
For me, it's the 1 out of 3. Because I can more easily see the 3 people and I can relate. Oh, I know 3 women around me in my life, and I would feel pity if one of them got to be sexually harassed.
So rightly so. And it's not just you, but most people in the world would connect better with the last articulation.
Yeah.
So that's the well-told part. You've got the data, you've got the truth. Your truth is 30%. But how many people sit back and say, all right, now let me think about how can I bring this truth alive in a manner that connects well with people, connects with their emotions, and guides them to action. Most of the people don't make that effort, and they present 30% as 30%. And I'm just using this as one example here. But you get the essence of what I'm saying.
Yeah.
That's what well-told is about.
We have to make the data understandable and emotional. That's very true. And the last part was listening, and that made me think about maybe you know the book 7 Good Habits, and it's a fantastic book. It's a book I read probably 10 years ago when I started going into personal development. And one of the principles in the book is first try to understand before you you tell your side of the story. So maybe here is we should listen, like you say, to our audience. What is the problems? What are the challenges? What are the feelings? Is that what you mean about being a good listener? And then maybe give your perspective on it.
Yeah, absolutely. Before you can talk, before you can share, before you can provide a solution, you need to listen. And the best leaders in the world are great listeners too. I can share 2 stories here. One comes from one of my clients. It's one of the largest NGOs in the world, and it is from they operate in a country called Bangladesh.
Yes.
So Bangladesh's capital is Dhaka, and the NGO organization is called BRAC, B-R-A-C, BRAC.
Okay.
Now here's a story, from BRAC. One of the leaders of BRAC, there was an influx of Rohingyas from Myanmar, where they were persecuted some time back, and many of them fled the country and escaped into Bangladesh to take refuge as illegal immigrants. And the government empathetically set up camps for the children. Now, BRAC was doing some relief work there, and the leader was going and interacting with the people who were living in tents with bare minimum items there. There's a leader who went into a tent, and she saw a girl there, barely 9 years old, and she asked the girl a question: what would you like to be when you grow up? And the girl said, I'd like to be a television. I'd like to be a television set. Now, most people would have laughed it off and moved on. And they would have just done this, what I'm doing. Oh, I don't know what she's talking about. And they would have just gone because they were not listening in and they are not present in the moment. But this leader was present in the moment. So she paused and she said, I've never heard an answer like that ever before. And then she asked a question, why is that you say so? And the child said, we have nothing in this house. We have very few possessions. But look at this television and look at my clothes. And the leader saw that the clothes were dirty. They were almost like a rag. And she said, look at the television. It's absolutely clean. When the television is on and when the television speaks, everybody in my house listens to the television. What she was implying is that I am not heard that well. And nobody pays me as much attention. And that's why I want to be a television. The leader had enough empathy to understand the unspoken there and read between the lines. And that's listening. So whether it is the developmental sector or you're a great marketeer, you can conduct market research and all of market research, and people will say they will answer questions. But some of the best products are developed by a company called Apple, which does not do too much market research, but that does not mean they are not listening and observing. In fact, they go deeper and they listen to the unsaid, which is why they are able to be ahead of the curve. So one story for you from the development sector and one story from you from the technology sector. But that's the power.
Yeah, I think that's a great story. Those are very good examples. And like you say, asking the question why is that? Once we know the why, like you say, everything opens up. We get a deeper understanding. So yeah, Apple is amazing, making some great products. I get to think about a quote, I think was Henry Ford. When you ask the client what they want, he said they want a faster horse, but in reality, you give them the car, right?
Absolutely.
So you look deeper, like you say. Yeah.
And you're a fantastic storyteller. You heard one story, and you were just in the moment. You were able to come up with a parallel story. Now I find you just surprised me there with a parallel story, with that Henry Ford story. But that's what good storytellers do. They're able to look at a story and say, what's the structure there? Can I find a parallel story that mimics the same structure? And you found another example that reinforces the same principle. Which means that you're a good storyteller, you're a great listener, and a good public speaker to build on that, to use the power of repetition to enforce, to repeat a point with another example. Lovely.
Thank you. Thank you. So one thing I thought a little bit is actually, this is something I'm struggling with myself quite a bit. So I'm very interested to hear about your take on this. So you talk about in your videos and in the talks I've seen about, for instance, in teaching situations, that there are some complex situations. For instance, you mentioned the Pythagorean theorem, and then you say, we're gonna remember this. Most people don't remember it, but we all pretty much remember some stories we heard as a child. And then I was just wondering, how would you come about it? How can we tell a story? Because it is a fairly complex thing. You can say the Pythagorean theorem. How would you teach it? I would love to hear that, or it doesn't have to be exactly that, but something else, a little bit. Yeah, you get my point. Complex, abstract.
Now think back. I had this moment of realization some time back that when you think back about your own childhood, and when you look back at your childhood, when you look back at your school days, think about this. The subjects that you love the most, it's very likely they were taught by teachers also you like the most. And the subjects that you didn't like were taught by teachers you didn't like. For most of us, it's a very high degree of correlation between the subjects we like and the teachers we like. And those teachers were good storytellers. The teachers who remove the fear of subject tell stories. You may not be able to explain gravity but we all remember a story about Isaac Newton sitting under a tree and an
Oh.
apple falling from the head. We may not be able to explain uh, the Archimedes principle, but we all remember a story about a man who got into a bathtub and then ran down the street naked, shouting "Eureka, Eureka!"
Mm-hmm.
Uh, that's how we remember. So in our work with schools, what we do is, I may not be a math teacher,
No, no.
but I know storytelling. So what I do is I sit with a math expert and I say, here's the storytelling technique, but you're the subject matter expert. And let's bring in a language expert, like a English teacher or a art teacher. And now that I give you this idea of what a story is, let's use the construct to create a story. And then the math teacher would create a story. So going back to the question that you asked, my teacher didn't teach me the Pythagoras by rote, but
Mm.
told me a story. And he told me a story that I'm going to enact for you. He said,
Okay,
imagine
awesome.
that there's a young kid, and there's a young kid, he wakes up in the morning and he's just woken up. He comes out of his house and he yawns and stretches like this. And as he yawns and stretches, the sun is rising behind him in the east. So east is here.
Okay.
And you know this, that the morning sun casts long shadows. So when this kid is yawning in the morning, it casts a long shadow that falls way away. Now, if you were to draw a straight line that connects this outstretched hand to where the shadow falls, and from where the shadow falls all the way back to this guy's feet, you would get a right angled triangle. And that's how my teacher introduced the concept of a right angled triangle, and then moved on from there to the Pythagorean. They were introducing characters and then conflicts and real situations to teach complex characters and complex formula. But I was lucky, and not all of us are lucky to get good teachers, which is why I strongly believe that teachers must learn storytelling before they start teaching.
I think you're right, and what a beautiful story. That's a great example. I think you're right about the storytelling part. And it's such a shame that you can say most teachers actually only learn the subject matter and not the story. So here's some inspiration for math teachers and other people dealing with technical issues. So one thing I wanted to ask you is how can people practice the stories? Well, I mean, what do you do? I mean, you're obviously a skilled storyteller. What do you teach to people, and maybe what do you do yourself to become even better as a storyteller?
Uh, the best practice to be a tennis player is to play a lot of tennis.
Yes.
The best practice to be a snooker player is to play a lot of snooker.
Mm.
If you want to be a good soccer player, you need to play a lot of soccer to start
Yeah.
with. So the first thing that I say is stop thinking and start doing. There's have this bias for action. So start telling stories. I have seen, in companies, in organizations, there are these conferences that happen or training programs, and then people are divided in groups, and then a group task is given to a group of 4 or 5, and you can see that there are 4 or 5 kinds of people there.
Okay.
One is the person who says, "Hey, let's do this work." They're very enthusiastic people. Let's do this. Let's beat everyone. We need to compete with everyone. They are really enthusiastic people. The second is the guy who says, hey, let's go for a smoke break. Uh, uh, I really need a smoke break. So these are the ones who don't want to work too hard. Then there is a third one who says, hey, my increment doesn't depend on this. Let's go find out what others are doing, and then we'll come up with something at the end. Don't worry too much. And there's a fourth one who says, hey guys, I will write down and make a presentation, but don't make me present it. I don't like to go on stage. And in almost every group, there is a person like this. If you are the guy like that, you've been missing the opportunities to go and play soccer, to go and play tennis, because you've been missing all the opportunities to stand up and tell a story. So grab the opportunities that come your way and start telling. Don't wait for opportunities. If you can join a club like a Toastmasters club,
Mm.
find a Toastmasters club and start telling. But in your everyday life, there are many opportunities where you can tell stories. So look at your life. Your life is full of stories.
Yeah.
Start looking at your own life as a source of stories. You know, all of us have stories about a lesson we've learned from a teacher or from a parent, or a lesson we've learned, or a lesson we've learned from somebody who was way down the hierarchy, like from a janitor or from a kid.
Mm.
Now start putting down those stories. All of us have success stories, but most of us hesitate to tell failure stories.
Mm.
Leaders don't hesitate to share failure stories. They embrace the vulnerability. So look at your life, and it's full of stories, but you've never told them. Look at your organization and convert your presentations. Resist doing a presentation and say, force a constraint on yourself that I have 20 minutes. I can either do a presentation or tell a story. Can I keep my laptop away? Challenge yourself and
Mm.
go ahead. And that's the best way to get started. Once you've started like that, then find a coach or read some books on, so that you get the assistance of techniques and frameworks and methods, like frame of reference, 3 out of 10, 30%, and 1 out of 3. There are 3 ways of saying something.
Yeah.
I call that choosing the frame of reference. Which frame
Yeah.
of reference are you going to use to articulate this? So there are techniques like that, and sometimes it's good to go get those techniques on your side. You can get them from books. You can self-learn on YouTube, or if you want it condensed, you can approach a coach, because a coach would guide you and give you feedback as well.
Mm.
So, but the priority is that you get started.
I think you're completely right about doing, and sometimes I say to my clients that it takes about an afternoon to read the theory about a great presentation, but you can spend a lifetime learning it, right? The theory is not that hard, but really doing it can take a long time. So that's a really good key takeaway. Just go out there, do it, give those presentations. And I noted here that you say, make a list. You have your phone with you probably most of the day, have a Google document and type the title, the story that happened to you, because then we can have it later and we can retell it. Like you also talk about in your videos, with one of the exercises you do with people. And the third time, it's much better than the first. And imagine if we told it 30 times, right? So a list. And I really love that you mentioned vulnerability and failure stories. I'm personally a big fan myself of, I don't know if you've heard of Brené Brown. It's a great speaker. She has really made this theme bigger, especially in the United States, and it's spreading across. Also vulnerability, because I think it connects to your point about being authentic. It's not authentic. We go through life only winning, and it's rare that we win the first time we do something, you know. So sharing that, and then you say a coach. Obviously, I don't think you need to study much of high performance in a coach. And you mentioned books. Do you have maybe a couple of books that could inspire people?
Well, there are quite a few.
Okay. Yeah, just mention a couple.
I would really encourage people to look at reviews on Amazon rather than just go with my recommendations. But
Okay.
I would certainly say Sean Callahan. One can look up a book by Sean Callahan. He's part of an organization called Anecdote.
Okay.
There's a on structure for business narratives and pitches. I find Andy Raskin to be very good. He's done a takedown or a tear down on one of the greatest sales decks ever written.
Okay.
In terms of public speaking, there are many books out there on Speak Like TED. But Chris Anderson, who was
Yeah.
part of TED himself, has written a book, and that's a great place to start on how to speak like
Okay.
TED.
Yeah. Awesome. Three great books people can use, but please take your advice and more of doing, a little bit of reading, right? I don't know. I think we've covered a lot of good things. I mean, I don't know if you have something you want to add. I mean, I'm asking all the questions, But maybe you have something you say, hey, this was something that could be nice to touch upon here, and in the end, favorite thing in storytelling.
Rather, I have a question for you.
Okay.
As a coach, you work with many people and you've been in the arena of public speaking, and you get to see and read a lot of books, see a lot of presentations, maybe hear a lot of talks on
Yeah.
YouTube. What has been a story that touched your heart? If you could tell us something about that, it could be a leader who spoke, or it could be a child or a teacher, or maybe an innovator, an entrepreneur. But tell us about a story moment that touched your heart, or something that's really close to you. I think that would be a good way to close. Something
Yeah.
for me to learn
Okay.
from you.
Yeah, I would love to. Thank you for the question. Amazing question. One talk I love is the TED Talk it's about education, because I've also spent a lot of time about teaching. It's I cannot remember. It's Robertson something. It's very Ken Robinson. Yes, that's Sir Ken Robinson. He has an amazing TED Talk. And first of all, it's a very funny talk. It's a very interesting talk. But what I loved was he gave this picture in this TED Talk. We are not just somebody that knows math or chemistry. We need to be whole human beings. Dancing is just as important as being able to solve an equation. Playing an instrument is important. We need to be whole human beings and embrace every facility of who we are. And I think it really connected on a deeper level that we should find our passion and follow it. Doesn't mean if you don't like mathematics, it's good you learn 2 + 2, but really go most for what you love. And schools just often, especially here in the Western world, I don't know how it is in India, but focus a lot on the scientific subjects. Those have the highest hierarchy. Then comes maybe Danish as a language, and then in the bottom is the classes that are the more, you can say, dancing, singing, and I think it just inspired me. Follow your passion and learn the other things. Okay, you're going to have a wonderful life and help a lot of people. So that's one of my favorite talks, and it's just as funny as stand up at the same time.
Thank you. Thank you for the gift of that. That TED Talk is also one of my favorite ones. And it's really interesting that he talked about passion and happiness. It's no wonder today that at the highest of the best universities in the world, at the highest temple of learning that one can say, in Harvard, one of the most popular course is a course on happiness.
Yes.
And so certainly education has failed us somewhere. It has turned us into coders and programmers, and into doctors and lawyers and engineers and technicians. But somehow we've forgotten how to have fun. And that's why today people are learning through a course on happiness, how to have fun. But that talk delivered with so much passion, so much expertise, so much humor, as you pointed out. So there's so much wisdom, but delivered in such an entertaining way. And all of that done within 20 minutes. One of my best TED Talks as well. Thank you for that.
Okay, fantastic. So Amin, before we kind of close off here, I want to hear, where can people find you? I know you have your webpage, storywala.com. You have your LinkedIn profile where we connected, and I love reading and seeing your videos. You have a lot of followers, and there's a reason why you have a lot of followers, because you give good content and you're a great guy. And I love reading your blog on Storywala. But maybe, I don't know, you have other places people can follow you, a book you wrote, a course, anything?
These are the places. We also have a YouTube channel, but the best way to reach me is on LinkedIn, Amin Haq on LinkedIn, or our website, storywalas.com. Story means story. You know what that means.
Yes.
Walas is the Hindi word for people or folks. So storywalas means story people or story folks. That's what it means. And email ID is very simple to remember. It's hello, HELLO, at storywalas.com. I look forward to hearing from all of you. Thank you, Asghar, once again for a wonderful conversation on one of my best love topics, as a topic that I feel excited about a topic I feel passionate about, storytelling. To all the listeners, may each one of you be a fantastic storyteller. More importantly, may each one of you be a better listener, because then you will know which story to tell. May the power of stories be on your side always.
Fantastic.